Look, if you're totally exhausted by nightly homework battles that honestly feel way more like a high stakes hostage negotiation than a study session, well, you're absolutely not alone. In this explainer, we're going to dive deep into Dr. Omer Chelikkol's really fascinating insights on how we can finally shift away from those exhausting homework reminders. We want to actually build your child's independence, right? So we'll look at how to swap out those repeated nagging prompts for real skills, a solid structure, and a genuine growing sense of responsibility. All right, let's jump right into this. So if your evenings sound exactly like this, hey, start your homework. Wait, did you start? Please put your phone away. Then you know firsthand the utter fatigue of acting as your kid's nightly task manager. I mean, 5 minutes later, it's, how many questions have you finished? And then by the end of the night, you're saying, hey, don't forget to upload the assignment. Sure, the homework might eventually get done, but it leaves you feeling like a full-time micromanaging supervisor. And honestly, it leaves your child feeling like they're constantly being watched. These constant reminders might produce a little short-term action, but they almost never build any real independent responsibility. To help break down this really exhausting dynamic, our agenda today is pretty straightforward. First, we'll cover the reminder trap, then the missing skill, our core 5-part plan, graduated support, and finally, avoiding mistakes. Okay, let's get right into section 1, the reminder trap. The real core issue here is that your family has, totally inadvertently, practiced a system where the adult does all the heavy lifting. Think about it. The parent notices what's missing, remembers the deadlines, plans out the work, and monitors the progress. Without even meaning to, you've basically become your child's external memory drive. And meanwhile, the child's role just shrinks down to resisting, delaying, or maybe eventually complying. Look, if a kid hears 10 reminders every single evening, that very first reminder doesn't even signal action anymore. It just signals that, hey, 9 more reminders are coming. They know they can wait because, well, you're going to remember the deadline for them. Eventually, both sides crash into what Dr. Chilick calls reminder fatigue. This is exactly where instructions lose their meaning entirely. Your voice just turns into background noise. For parents, staying on this constant high alert to monitor every single unfinished step, well, it just skyrockets frustration. And as that frustration bubbles up, the reminders usually get longer and, unfortunately, a bit more personal. You might catch yourself asking unhelpful, kind of shaming questions like, why can't you remember anything? Or how many times do I have to tell you? Look, those sentences express very genuine exhaustion, the heavy emotional toll of the nightly grind, but they just don't teach a usable skill. They really just increase shame. What we need here are fewer words and a much more visible system. Which brings us to section 2, the missing skill. Before you give another reminder tonight, I really want you to ask yourself, what specific action is your child actually unable to do independently right now? Because here's the thing, a reminder is only useful when it brings attention back to a plan that the child already fully understands. It becomes utterly useless when the reminder replaces the plan altogether. Really broad commands like remember your homework simply don't teach those specific missing skills. Different problems require entirely different supports. For instance, are they forgetting the start time? Okay, then maybe a timer is what helps. Are they unable to identify the very first task? A checklist might hit the nail on the head there. If they're constantly losing track of materials, well, they probably need a properly prepared workspace. Or if they do the work but keep forgetting to actually submit it, they need a specific closing routine. You absolutely have to identify the exact gap before you can even try to bridge it. All right, moving to section 3, the 5-part plan. This plan is all about transitioning your role from constant prompting to establishing a really neutral, predictable structure. Step 1, you have to agree on the routine before the reminder is even needed. Decide when homework starts, where the materials live, and when screens are put away. The child has to know the plan before you prompt them. Step 2 is huge. Move the reminder out of your voice and into visible tools. We're talking a whiteboard, a timer, a visual schedule. The reminder still exists, but now it's just a neutral object in the room, not a nagging parent. And for step 3, instead of repeating those long, drawn-out instructions, your new role is just to provide one single brief cue. Say something like, the timer ring, or, hey, what's the next box on your list? The cue should literally just direct the child back to the system. Then comes step 4, which is crucial. Allow a reasonable pause. You have to give them time to process the cue and actually shift their attention. If you jump in and repeat the instruction 3 seconds later, you're just training them to wait for the final reminder again. Finally, step 5, review responsibility at the end. Don't hover and supervise every minute. Just review what actually got completed and figure out what support is still needed, helping them connect their initial planning to the actual outcome. Let's look at section 4, graduated support. You know, Building true independence requires a really well-planned transfer over time. It is not an abrupt, sink-or-swim withdrawal of your help. True independence shouldn't just be demanded all at once, out of nowhere. For example, in week 1, a younger child might actually need you to sit nearby and read the checklist out loud with them. But by week 2, they might be able to follow the list on their own while you just check in after certain work periods. And by week 3, they're working independently and you just review the list together at the very end. For teenagers, maybe they just need a weekly review of their deadlines. The point is, the support slowly decreases as their skill level increases. To get this process rolling smoothly, Dr. Çelikkol suggests something called a 7-day reminder audit. For 1 week, your job is just to observe. Literally, just count how many verbal reminders you give, but here's the catch. Do it without criticizing anyone. Just notice which reminder actually resulted in action and try to spot what specific skills seemed missing. Then, pick just one repeated reminder and replace it with one external support tool. Maybe you introduce a start alarm, or just pick a specific spot where the phone charges during homework time. At the end of the week, ask yourself, okay, did the number of verbal reminders go down? What's our next small step? The goal here isn't to hit 0 reminders immediately. It's to use fewer, clearer reminders that actually build skills. Now for Section 5, Avoiding Mistakes. As you start doing this, there are a few really common stumbling blocks you'll want to watch out for. A massive mistake is sudden removal of help. Remember, a kid who is completely dependent on your prompting needs a very gradual transition. Another trap is creating a checklist that is just so incredibly long it becomes overwhelming. Or worse, verbally reminding them about every single item on that physical checklist. Don't do that. Instead, use calm phrases like, check the plan, or I've already given the agreed reminder. If they miss something, instead of just defaulting to anger or sarcasm, which is so easy to do when you're tired, empower them. Ask them calmly, hey, you forgot this part today. What can we do to make it more visible tomorrow? It's also absolutely crucial to avoid constantly rescuing them from manageable, non-dangerous mistakes. If you are rushing in at 11 p.m. to finish their science project for them, or you're always messaging the teacher to beg for an extension, you are totally severing the connection between their responsibility and the actual outcome. Now, obviously, sometimes adult intervention is completely appropriate, like if a task was wildly unclear or a consequence is just way too excessive. But generally speaking, they really need to learn from real, proportionate outcomes. That's how they figure out what kind of system will prevent that same failure tomorrow. Empathy goes a very long way here. Be super supportive, but let the system do the teaching. I do need to add an important caveat here. If your child faces persistent underlying issues, we're talking attention regulation difficulties, working memory weaknesses, learning problems, anxiety, depression, or just an overwhelmingly massive workload, they might need much more substantial support. Repeated reminders are absolutely not going to solve those kinds of underlying issues. In those specific situations, your family might need to collaborate with the school, do some explicit organizational teaching, or even get qualified educational or healthcare assessments. Independence always has to be measured against your child's unique developmental needs, not against some other kid's performance. Ultimately, you've got to remember that at first, children really do need adults to provide a lot of this structure. But over time, that structure should become highly visible, teachable, and increasingly usable by the kids themselves. True independence isn't just abandoning them to figure it out. It grows through supported practice and a very gradual transfer of power. The goal isn't to have a perfectly silent parent and a completely flawless child. It's to build a family system where you don't have to carry every single deadline, every decision, and every next step completely in your own memory. So as you head into your evening tonight, I'll leave you with this final thought. Is your current system actually building your child's independence? Or are you just doing whatever it takes to survive the night and get tonight's homework done? Are you forcing the work through, or are you finally handing over the tools they're going to need for the rest of their lives?